Welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And here we are, episode 63, and it is a return to our In Memoriam. Rob, tell us about In Memoriam.
So, it's a feature. We've done a couple, and each time we talk about our top 5 different forms of death. So, we have covered characters that we didn't want to die, characters that we did want to die.
I believe we've done our top 5 horror deaths.
Top 5 horror
general deaths.
Yeah. And this time we are taking a look at our top 5 terrifying deaths. Now, as always, before we start, I will get this in. Welcome to the show, and thank you to all our long-time listeners. And if this is your first time checking out the podcast, welcome. Get yourself a tea, coffee, or a little something stronger and just enjoy it. And if you could hit that subscribe button and leave us a review, it helps us grow. It would always be greatly appreciated.
So top 5 scariest deaths in horror.
Yeah.
I did say specifically horror because I didn't want to limit us necessarily. If there's something that really scarily traumatized you, but it wasn't necessarily a film, I did say it's open. It doesn't like we might have just done films, but I didn't want to lowball us into just that area because I don't think I'd do this. We won't do the same again on every single different genre of different like film, TV, because there's not always that many in certain ones. So you can't always do this again and again and again. So I kind of opened it up. So when we come into this, it's always up to our minds of what we're thinking. And part of the fun is that we're talking about like why we chose it, or does it give a lasting memory for us? It's always it normally has a nice little trip down memory lane occasionally with one of our choices. Sometimes it's ones that we've never heard of before.
Yes.
So we have chosen 5 films. I believe we'll go 5 to 1.
Yeah.
I would say for me, although I always put them into order, and I have put them into order this time, I do have other ones which if for some reason we had a double booked, I can jump onto a different one. Although at the same time, I don't know why, because it's the same with like I think top 5 horror deaths. I did go with like my number 1, but it's such a changeable thing, isn't it to have these kind of choices? And I can't necessarily say my choice today like is 1 to 5. It's just more like what I felt with in terms of how we look at it, or maybe how over talked about certain ones. Like there might be one that I threw in that was like, I feel like I have to say this one.
Yeah.
But at the same time, which to many would probably be like a greatest, but then it's so not.
Well,
just
before we jump straight into it, because I mean, whenever we do these top 5s or top 3s, it's always very personal. You know, if you listen to our top summer horrors, the reason why we love doing these features is because we kind of set ourselves a task, but then we don't kind of specify too much what that is. So top 3 summer horrors was up to us. Is it something we watched during the summer? Was it released during the summer? Is it set during the summer? And terrifying can mean its own different things.
Yeah.
So for you, Eep, what is a terrifying death for you? Because horror movies are filled with.
Well, that's what I mean. It's terrifying, scariest, like that kind of area. If it's, it's scariest, but I thought the same thing while I was thinking about it. I was like, what is it? Because for some people, it might be a jump scare.
Yeah.
For some people, it might be something that just left a lasting impact. Like there was something just so disturbing about the death. Sometimes for some people, like maybe, that was like it was so quick or things like that. But sometimes there's something around the character, that there was something so likable about the character that the fact that they died that way might suddenly make you go, oh my God, like that left an impact on my mind. Sometimes it's barely, it might even be more about how scary the whole scene was. It might not necessarily be exactly that death. And minds have all kind of taken up with that. It might be how disturbing a scene which had lots of death in it, or things like that. Like, so each one I think hit me in maybe a slightly different way. That's why I had like 15.
Yeah, I agree.
and then I started trying to reduce them down. And even then I think I'm looking at it going, I've left that one off and I think that one's quite good. But again, and we've also, because we've done a few of these about different deaths, there's some films that I felt had already popped up a fair few times.
Yeah.
So I decided, even though I put them on my original list, I was like, I'll leave those off, and maybe they'll get an honourable mention at the end. We'll get some social media jumps in at the end.
We'll always go to the.
How about you? How did your death process go? Your scariest deaths in horror, or
so for me, it's a mixture of. You'll notice, particularly when I get to my 3, 2, 1, you'll notice there's a particular theme throughout them, but I'm not going to ruin it yet. I'll try and hook you with that. But I think there's a sense of powerlessness for me, and it's just a sense of powerlessness and not being able to do anything whilst this is happening to you, having that body autonomy or having that autonomy over yourself removed, not being able to fight back, or having to potentially do something to yourself.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
I feel like my mind's already guessing where you'd be.
You're trying.
But I completely. It's for me, it did come down to which of these left a biggest impact on me, as in like after it, I couldn't stop thinking about that. Kind of death. If it was scary to me, because we've mentioned before, I've never been hugely scared, even when I was very young, by them. I always found them interesting, intriguing. But if ever there was one that really disturbed me or kind of left me with a sense of, oh wow, or I didn't expect it maybe in that way, then that's probably the one that I found scariest because it stayed with me. And as I said, there's a few that are not there that definitely stayed with me, but they've just been brought up before. Because there are only so many deaths, even though there are millions.
Well, I'll jump in because I think you started the first top 3 summer horrors. Obviously, summer has been and gone rip, so go and check that out. My first terrifying death is from Tourist Trap, 1979. And Tourist Trap is a very weird film. I watched this for the first time this year, and it's an American supernatural slasher directed by David Schmoeller. I believe I'm pronouncing that correct. It's the first time I've watched it this year, and the film itself, I'm undecided on whether I think it's a really weird, creepy film or whether it's kind of really hokey and just weird. I'm undecided. I did like it, but I don't know which way, And for me, the most terrifying death in this is Tina's death. So Tina is just a character who's kind of randomly brought into it, which is weird. The kind of setup is that it's these people who are making their way through America, and they're on some back road. The car breaks down and they go to check out this tourist trap, which is just like a weird museum for tourists, and it's about these mannequins and these waxworks, so it's kind of weird. But the creepiest thing about this one's death is Tina is bound to a table. She can't do anything apart from move her face. And she has this weird killer who's got this kind of mannequin mask hulking over her. And he's speaking to her in this weird voice. But then what he's doing is I believe he's turning her into some kind of mannequin while she's alive. So what he's doing is, and the whole scene maybe is over about 5 minutes, and it's all slow. There's no music or anything. What he's doing is he's put in what we would call paper mache. I think Americans call plaster of Paris. And he's putting it over her face, and it's just so hard because she's bound there, and he starts plastering it all over her face, and eventually covering her mouth and nose and suffocating.
A bit like House of Wax,
House of Wax, but a slower, kind of worse process whilst you're alive. And when I was watching this, the whole of the film, I kind of found the other deaths to be a bit hokey. Somebody, because the killer is implied to have supernatural powers, so it could levitate a knife and throw into somebody, that kind of stuff. But this film was just terrifying. Because you saw her screaming, and then you saw her muffled screams and her fighting for breath, and then you just saw her stop. And it's such a horrid film, horrid death. And watching it, I was absolutely terrified. I just couldn't look away.
What, from this one scene?
From this one
death scene.
This one death scene throughout the whole film.
The rest of it a bit.
The rest of it's a bit, hit and miss, and I don't know what I think of it. But this scene in particular is just terrifying. For me, it's the highlight of the film.
Yeah.
And it's just super creepy.
I think sometimes they do hit like that. Sometimes you can even in you can watch some bad horror films, and yet there's still one scene that's like, okay, didn't expect that. That was disturbing in a way I didn't expect, or that just makes me feel, imagine if you were in that position. And
exactly.
Sometimes not like perfect films, but you've got one scene that kind of defines it. And I think there were definitely a bunch on my list that were like, the film's not amazing, but that one scene is fucking damn.
It's just prolonged. But that is my first one to kick us off.
Okay, I'm going to kick off, and the reason I put this out is because this is the most obvious, but also because I watched the remake yesterday.
Okay.
And it's the psycho shower scene.
Okay.
I had to go with that because I think it just is. It has a lasting impact. I mean, and this is a more than one way. So yes, I know it's classic and it's Hitchcock and it's pretty much the foundation of majority of good horror from that day.
And it's an iconic scene.
Oh yeah, and the fact that you know about the background of the fact that this scene, like the whole film throws you off completely. You've got Marion Crane. You follow her for almost the first 40 minutes, and like it's kind of like you're not expecting what it is. It almost doesn't seem like a horror film for the first 40 minutes. Yeah. It's got the music. It's definitely like very suspenseful in a way, but it's not necessarily a horror film until this scene hits. And I know back then it was absolute hysterics. Like people were fucking fainting in the cinema and walking out and being absolutely terrified of this scene, which is not actually, you only see the knife and blood. You don't actually see the knife enter or anything like that.
But it's so well.
It's all about your imagination. I think for me, what hits this is more, and I think everyone knows this, is the idea that this gave in your head. Just like if we said something like Final Destination, the truck and the logs that you see all the time on Insta, people always post about that, and I have that all the time, and it's stuck in your head. The shower is a legitimate time when I think you feel most vulnerable. Yeah, when you're stood there. The amount of times I've been stood in my house and I hear a noise, and I'm like, I'm the only person in the house. Even if I've got the dog and stuff, I was like, I swear that was a door, or I swear that was someone like me. And you're like, what the fuck would I do if I'm like butt naked? And
if I'm hanging dong now for fights.
Exactly, yeah. And I feel like maybe we've mentioned this before, but it just is. I feel like of the scariest steps, this I think has just had such a long-lasting impact. But it's something that someone does every single day. Yeah. And it leaves this disturbing image in your head that someone could just kind of walk in. Not just the fact that the scene is fantastically shot, and the imagery, the drain in the eye, and that is amazing. Yeah. And it's not so I talk about like too much, but I basically had a bunch of classic ones that are like, these are ones that are like definitely 100% the scariest ones, and I only want to pick one that I think is really iconic, but I don't want to have a list of just iconic ones because I just thought that was boring. Yeah, so I decided my first one out would be one that is just like, this is the iconic one. This is the one that instigates the fear in like other films like that. Yeah. And off of that there were other ones, but this is the one that I just think every time I go into the shower, I think this is going to happen. Like this is going to happen, in whatever way it is. It might not be a man dressed as his mother, but it's definitely someone coming in like suddenly like shit, or like what would I do? But you're just completely vulnerable, and that sense of vulnerability and the sense of something that people do every day, I think, is what makes a great scary horror death. Yeah, is that sense of you're just like. And we've had this scene homage to and played to. The recent Scream film had that whole scene when he's and you think that that's where it's going, and but that again plays on like things you're just about your house and that you could die in that way. Yeah,
your safe zone.
Exactly. That's what I mean. So I think this is just one that not only had a huge impact on horror, but just had a lasting impact that people just continue to think about it. For a film that has basically it only has 2 deaths in the whole film. Yeah. You know what I mean? And yet it does leave that. And even then, like in the same film, you've got the one where the other death as he walks up the stairs and gets sliced just as you're coming up the top of the stairs. It's general fears that things could happen to you. And I think, for me, that's what makes some of the best ones. And I did say I watched I watched the remake, the Vince Vaughn
I haven't
remake.
seen the remake for years. I've only watched it
was because it was on TV, and sadly Anne Heche died, and I think that might have been why they were playing it again on TV. So I watched it, and I forgot that the film is literally a shot-for-shot remake. Yeah. It's exactly the same film, just modern in the 90s. Yeah. But it's exactly, the shots are the same, the dialogue's basically almost exactly the same, apart from a few 90s tweaks. It's a strange, like you said, it's a strange in at times you're like Vince Vaughn's working, at times you're like Vince Vaughn doesn't work. And it's all just a bit of it's odd. It's odd. But it's got a hell of a cast though.
Yeah, it has.
But yeah, that's just what rang into my head. I was like, because I was suddenly watching that, I was like, right, I've seen basically the same film again here. Yeah. And that's why it's cemented in my head that this will be the one and not one of the other ones that I'll mention at the end, just in case anything else pops up. So that's my first.
Okay.
Or my fifth.
well, my number 4, or my second, fifth. Whichever way we're working, is The Green Inferno from 2013.
Yeah.
So obviously directed by Eli Roth, and is kind of a throwback to that kind of,
just like a homage to Cannibal Holocaust,
not Animal Holocaust, Animal Holocaust, Animal Holocaust,
Animal Holocaust. That's a very different film.
That sounds like it would be a sequel to Animal Farm, which kind of would work. But there's 2 particularly gruesome deaths in this film. And it's not that I'm like this, unlike the Psycho one, where it's a situation that could probably happen. I know I'm not going to ever find myself, touch wood, in the middle of the Amazon kidnapped by a cannibal tribe.
Maybe.
But there's something about this film where we get these people who are captured by these cannibals. Now the first kill, which solidifies that they're cannibals, is extremely gruesome. We get, I think his name's Fedor, I can't remember, but basically he gets this sedative dust blown in his face, and then when he's on, put on this table, they poke his eyes out, they cut his arms off, and then decapitate him. Fucking gruesome.
I was gonna say, you already know with Eli Roth from Hostel and stuff like that, he goes full on the gore. He likes to go full on
gore. But that isn't the death that freaks me out the most. The one that freaks me out the most is I'm trying to remember the.
Well, the interesting part is, although you said like you'll never be in the Amazon and things like that, but I think there is, and he did this with Hostel, and he did the same with this. It's still the idea that you're going somewhere unknown.
Yeah,
when you travel somewhere, the idea that something could happen to you, and it's just the it's the condition. In Hostel, it was Amsterdam, and it was the idea that you go to these sex like
Eastern European
or Amsterdam style kind of. You're going on this party holiday, you're going to get drawn in by that, and this could happen to you. And the Amazon is that's the same for them. It's the idea that you could get lost or taken, or like something completely like unknown, or something that's going to eat you. It might not even be cannibals necessarily, but you go to the Amazon and suddenly, oh shit, there's a giant snake or some crocodile. Kind of wildlife or a crocodile, and you're definitely
you're top of the food chain anymore. And it's Lars's death, who is played by Daryl Sabara, who is
Spy Kids,
and also
Rob Zombie's Halloween,
and also the loving husband of Meghan Trainor.
Oh yes,
who I only found out about a couple of last week.
I saw that. I saw that a while ago that he was that. I was like,
oh, But so Lars basically, whilst going to the Amazon, he packs a massive bag of weed. And one of the characters ends up committing suicide in this cage. So what he thinks is, if we stuff them full of the weed, then when they cook the body and eat it, they'll all be too high, we can escape. The plan works. However, when he tries to escape, one of the people who doesn't want to escape hits him with the tranquilizer and knocks him out, so he can't. He then wakes up, and there's loads of
someone who doesn't want to escape cannibals.
Well, basically, his idea is that
I haven't seen this film, so I know of it.
But basically, like the first time somebody escapes the cage, they get killed. So he's like, "Oh no, it's not worth the risk." Eventually somebody will find us, because they've got a track or something like that. But what he does is he stops Lars from escaping. Lars then wakes up and he's surrounded by a bunch of villagers who
now have the munchies.
And are absolutely stoned. And what they do is they then said to eat him alive. It's terrifying, the idea of being it's not so much the scene, because you see them kind of swarm him and kind of biting into him, but it's not extremely graphic, unlike the establishing death when they get there. It's not as gruesome as that, but I think it's the implication, because he that guy, he dies pretty quickly, but he's given some kind of anesthetic or some kind of drug. So he's probably, whilst it's painful, he probably can't feel it as much, and it's quicker. Whereas Lars is slowly eaten alive by these people. It's that feeling of, yet again, powerlessness, because you're overpowered by a whole group of people. How slow it would be.
Yeah, no, I completely. I would guess it plays in that classic like zombie one, doesn't it? Where they're literally, you're swarmed and you're getting bitten and pulled apart, and just you're alive, and yet you're literally your whole body, and that is a horrifying thought.
Yeah,
because it's got to be one of the most painful ways to die as well, because quite often they're still alive for the majority of it. So you're feeling like every single bite and movement, and it's not one pain, it's hundreds of different pains all at once, until your body just goes into shock probably and just dies.
It's so grim.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of us are going to be able to sleep after doing this episode.
Go and check out all of these horrifying deaths and you'll be traumatized for life.
Eat cheese before bed and then watch a compilation of them on YouTube.
Okay, so my fourth is from The Hitchhiker.
Okay.
Yeah, Rutger Hauer, the original. And it is the female called Nash. I don't know if you've seen Hitchhiker.
I've seen the remake. I haven't seen the original.
So I don't know. I can't remember the remake. So I don't know. I know Sean Bean is the Hitchhiker remake. I can't remember it exactly though. So I don't know if this same scene plays out. Okay. Anyway, the idea of the hitchhiker, I feel, is pretty straightforward. The hitchhiker is, there's a guy on the side of the road, and it's that classic fear of, should you pick up that? And there's that idea of, should you trust strangers and should you let them? You feel like it's the right thing to do, and you probably feel guilty the second you drive past them, but at the same time you're like, oh, do I?
Or am I going to get killed?
It's not necessarily the fear of the hitchhiker. It's this death scene, which I think is more of the, because for me, the hitchhiker idea is not something that's I feel is ever going to come into my mind.
Really?
It's not really like, I feel like it's much more of a out in the middle of nowhere, America, big kind of area. You don't see it as much here, maybe down country, but I don't normally see many people in Britain standing there going, can I have a ride?
You don't see many, but I remember distinctively, because it was near the roundabout just near my house, out there. And I don't know where I was going, but I left and I pulled past, and there were two young girls, and they had a sign for a festival. I think it might have been Download that they were trying to get to.
I have seen them on the way to festivals. And stuff.
And I drove past them, and I had this instant feeling of almost guilt.
That's what I mean. You feel guilty for not.
No, but my guilt was, I should have picked them up and I'm not going anywhere near them, but I should have picked them up because I know I wouldn't have done anything. However,
someone else
might
have. And especially as it was like two younger girls, you feel much more vulnerable.
I was thinking,
much more vulnerable that,
Yeah, I was thinking, what if the next car they get into, they get killed, and I could have helped.
Rutger Hauer's in the next, or Sean Bean
in Gloucester, and that's what I was thinking. I was
I get that sense of it from that angle.
And then our friend Joe, used to hitchhike quite a lot.
Oh yeah,
and I would be like. What if he got in the car with the wrong person?
So, well, that's what I mean. That's what I guess for me, it's the idea that I don't think I would ever do it. I understand. I get the guilt part of it. I just don't think I'd ever necessarily take on. I don't know. And that's the same thing though. But it's the same, and it's been twisted in lots of ones where you think you trust the two vulnerable girls, and then they're the ones that kill me. And we've got, and of course. One that actually hits with this one is actually the idea with obviously the hitchhiker idea is the classic. You have that classic old story, the old folk tale of they pick up the hitchhiker and they're in the car, and then you hear like they're outside and like the whole like the head on the roof and the tapping on the roof, and that this is like a classic kind of ghost story kind of thing, which is always quite scary. So this kind of plays on that, but the scene that specifically it comes towards the end of the film, and it's the female character who was just kind of like a waitress at a thing called Nash.
Yeah,
and to finally play against the guy it's been terrorizing the whole film, Rutger Hauer's character has attached her up to 2 lorries.
Yes.
So does this happen in that?
It happens in the remake, but it happens to her boyfriend.
Okay, so they've swapped
round.
So this happens to the female in this one. And and it's kind of like he's kind of meta, but it's this major, like, it's more the terror on his side. Like, her side is horrible, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that I'll just call him a hitchhiker anyway. He uses this against him. He makes him have a choice.
Yeah.
He basically trying to push him to such a limit that he gives him a gun, then he's basically like, you kill me or I'll kill her.
Yeah.
While they're in this, and it's this whole kind of horrible that you're completely out of control. You've got like 2 ways to go. It's basically, you kill me, which probably means you're going to be arrested because the police are there at the same time, but don't seem to be doing much to be able to stop this. And she's there, and it's the idea that you are stuck in this moment, and she is literally being slowly, like, you can tell that she's slowly, like, her ligaments are slowly kind of getting, as the more, because he keeps revving to be like, I'm going to do it. And it's kind of like that bluff. It's that ultimate horrible bluff of, is he actually going to do this? Is he that mad? Is he that insane that he's literally in front of the police and everyone that's here, he's going to rip this woman in half?
Yeah.
And it kind of gets to this boiling point. He's like, the gun in his head, and the guy's just like, I can't take a life. You're trying to push me to the limit to say, take my life kind of thing, and I won't do it. Which is weird in a way, because then you know what's going to happen. But it's one of those weird psychological that kind of plays with your head, like, would you do it? Would you? Because I feel like I would have shot him in the head.
Yeah,
but I also feel like there's a catch-22 here, because I feel like even if you shot him in the head, I feel like there was still some way the character was thinking, she's still going to get ripped in half.
Potentially.
I'm going to release it'll happen anyway.
Yeah.
So I think either way, he was kind of, it was kind of one of those, you'd lose either way.
Yeah.
So he just decided to spare 1 less life instead of 2 lives at once. But, it's just that crazy, and then when he finally does, he like, the guy breaks down, and you just feel this complete loss of control. But it's the idea in both ways. It's one, that you're the person that's stuck in the situation that has to deal with someone of that man, and you're the one that has to break all of your morals and your ideas. But then you've also got another terrifying part to it. The idea that you are hooked up and that you're going to get, it's like a saw trap kind of thing. It's like the idea that you're going to get torn apart by this kind of thing. And then he lets go, he lets the clutch go, and she literally gets ripped apart.
Yeah.
You don't really see it. You see her like for moments before, and I think you see it more from the top half.
Yeah.
But it's still a kind of like a fucking out. Like, Jesus Christ, not only is that a horrible way to die, but she wasn't really, she's the person that's kind of just been drawn into this.
Yeah.
She wasn't a part, and now she is majorly, like, and he's done that.
And your life is in somebody else's hands,
Yeah, so imagine how terrifying it must be to be her in that situation, knowing I might die any second now. Like, the whole thing, and just even the way leading up to it, how he got her onto that fucking contraption is like the abuse and violence that must have been to get her stuck in that kind of position.
Yeah.
But it's a horror, it's a horrible thing, and it did definitely, like, I think it sticks with you, the idea that your choices can have these actions, and that, that you could be so helpless at the same time. It's just, I think it is quite a disturbing scene all around.
Yes, it is.
I do think I now remember it from the remake, and I don't know why. I think, but in the remake, I have boyfriend. In the original, it's a little bit more of she kind of drawn into it, so she feels even more like a help, like she shouldn't be in this position.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's worse. That's why it leaves a bad taste in it, because it's like, you really weren't part of this. You didn't deserve this kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it sounds pretty grim. So my third one is Saw 2 from 2005. Directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, and written by Lee Wadell and Bousman. Now, this one, I remember watching this film on pirate video when I was about 30. I think I might have been 12, 13 at the time. It was for my childhood friend at the time's birthday. And basically, we all went to his house, and we were going to watch some films. I think we used the guise of it being white chicks because his mum wouldn't let him watch horror films. So I had a copy of Saw 2 on Pirate. I got from somebody, or my brother had it, and he was like, "Oh, you making sure you bring white chicks around?" And I was like, "Yeah, bring white chicks." And then it could have led to a hilarious.
10 years later, that phrase would have a different.
Yeah.
You come to the party, you bring a white chicks.
Yeah,
bring a white.
Yeah. And yeah, either way, like. We convinced his mum that we were going to watch White Chicks and that she should go upstairs. And I think we started watching it at like 11 or half 11 or something when his mum was just going to bed. And obviously we turned the volume down. Us being 12, 13, watching this, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
And that is the opening scene with the death mask, where the character Michael, a police informant.
Yeah.
Wakes up and he's kind of wearing an iron mask filled with nails.
It's the one on either side, isn't it?
Yes.
So it will enclose in on your head with the nail. Yeah.
I think they call it like the Venus flytrap or something like that, but I just call it the death mask.
Oh yeah, definitely one of their best.
Yeah, one of the best ones.
Yeah.
And what he has to do is he's got a minute to get the key from under or in behind his eye.
Oh yeah.
And it's, for me, the horror thing about this is waking up in this random ass situation, again, you wouldn't believe that this happens to anybody or anything like that. And you just wake up in this situation, absolutely powerless to do anything apart from self-mutilate yourself. And having to do that, is disgusting anyway. Like this in later Saw films, we get people having to chop off arms and stuff like that. But there's something about the eye that I just think is so gross that you'll see the theme. Just obviously he's given a minute to do it as well. Imagine how much adrenaline and shock you'd have.
To jump yourself into that in that second.
Yeah.
I mean, the eye is one, like, it's horrible to do anyway. I mean, like, you being someone who does contact lenses, like, things like that at times, like, that's already hot. I've never done that because for me that's a horrible idea anyway. Just going for your eye, it's not so great. I like the idea of doing.
The first time I ever wore contact lenses, I don't wear them anymore. But the first time I went for my my consultation, they put a pair in, and he put them in, and he said, just it'll feel really weird for a minute or two, and then you'll adjust. And I was like, okay, it'll be fine. The panic I felt when he first put them in, the first time I ever wore contact lenses, I felt like there was a massive piece of plastic on my eye. I had a mini panic attack, and he was like, "You doing all right?" And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And I was freaking the fuck out. And then after like a minute or two, I completely forgot I was wearing them. It's that
I'm not
quick.
surprised. The idea of putting something onto your eye is a weird idea anyway. And then you think about when people, like, you hear people like, "Oh, the contact lens is gone. It's gone. It's slipped back."
Yeah,
it's like, with your eyes, like, I don't know why, but that's so odd to think, like, it's gone back. Right? It's like, where's it gone?
Yeah.
Like, is it coming back, or is it breaking down, or what's happening here? Like, that's horrible. It's the idea. Then you've got to stick a knife in your eye and plunge out. Plunge out. That's a different word. That's horrible. So no.
Yeah, and you've got a minute to do it, man.
Yeah, no.
That is not. I couldn't do it.
I love that classic. I think I used to be the one that used to give everyone back, like, kids, because whenever I had sleepovers and stuff, I'd always get, like, with rented horror movies or things like that. Like, my mum would let me watch it, and then I'd be letting other people watch it. So, like, showing them, like, Scream 3, Valentine, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and stuff like that. Cool. Just terrorizing children, basically. That was me. Like, the amount of my friends that, like, I think who've, like, the first time that they properly watched it, like, people who'd been, like, terrified of, say, like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then here I am showing them fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And not, we've mentioned about one story about, but there were loads of ones where I think I showed them to them. I was like, I probably scarred them for life. Like, with some of the shit that I was, like, well into, and they were probably not ready for at all. But, at a young age.
But at that young age, you just, I was particularly trying to seek all this stuff out, and saw, we being very young when Saw exploded, We were trying to find these films and trying to watch them, and they were gross and they were disgusting, but you couldn't not watch, And this mask has always stayed with me because, I mean, it's so gross, and that the ingenuity, like the genius. I'm not even going to try and use a good word, but the genius of the early Saw films, particularly maybe 1 to 3, was that these traps they had some. Not only did they have some kind of gross element behind them, but it was almost, it was almost Seven-like. It was almost kind of people getting some kind of punishment.
It was very ingenious. It was much more before they had to start kind of like, oh, we can't do the same thing again, so we're going to start making more twists and turns, and then it got convoluted. It was before the early stuff. So I was going to say, so I said about the Psycho, but the original Saw was originally on my list.
Okay,
and it's a death, but it's not a death we see. I just know that he dies.
Yeah,
is the original ending to the original Saw that stayed with me.
Yeah,
the screaming. Well, you don't see anything. You don't see him die because he's just left to die.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that you see a death, but
you
know what's coming from. That whole ending scene in the original, I think is such a great twist at the end anyway, where he gets off the ground.
Brilliant.
But that left over, just hearing the screaming, that sometimes is worse than any death you see. Because you're just left with the terror that someone must feel. That it's like, that's it, you're done now.
Yeah.
That's it, it's over. You should have cut yourself up, mate, because now you're fucked. You're dead. That's terrifying. And another one was Saw 3.
Yeah.
Timothy Young.
The torture rag.
The twist.
Yeah.
Twister, as I was thinking of it. That one's fucking horror because it's literally... It reminded me in Stranger Things, the recent season, when Vecna breaks their bones, and that's the same. But one by one, and gets
slowly as well.
Yeah, that one, I think really good because the idea of breaking your bones is a horrible idea. I've never broken a bone in my body.
No, luckily I haven't either.
No, so and I think weirdly, it's one of those weird things when you do it a lot when you're younger. I think you it's not that it's any better, but you get a bit used to it. The older you get, the more you start to think my bones are now more likely to break.
Yeah,
because I am getting old, and yet I've never had it happen to me. So I'm just like, I don't know why. It makes you start to think that the first time you do it now, because you've avoided all the little just broken fingers or broken now you're going to get something worse.
Yeah.
Like this, you're going to get twisted. So those ones, there is something about the Saw concept, yes, that is absolutely terrifying. And it's never, like with the films, for me, it's not that their films ever, it's not that the ideas necessarily got it, it's more just the plot kind of got stupider and stupider. But I love the basics of the originals.
Yeah.
The basics of the original, 3.
Yeah, I think the first 3 work well as a trilogy. And like you said, as we get deeper into it, the plot gets kind of more convoluted and the traps get more kind of eccentric. But the early 3 have just some really terrifying stuff, like the guy who's got he's got the poison in his blood and he has to walk on broken glass and everything's coated in flammable liquid, and he has to find a safe he has to find a combination for a safe. Or the big lad who has to crawl through barbed wire in 3 hours and get out. It takes it almost like, Seven, but a bit more extreme. And this one just...
Well, I guess it's 7 where you get to see the deaths.
Yeah, basically. And this is kind of... I don't know, it just stuck with me ever since I watched it. And the film does have some more horror, more horrid and terrifying ones, but it's just something about that for me. And if I was in there for an hour, maybe I could do it, but if you gave me a minute, I'm nowhere.
Your idea is not clicking straight to I'm going to shove this in my eye.
No, my idea is fuck this. Get out.
I mean there's part of me that and there's a part of me in that situation, I don't know why, but there's a part of me that would definitely go, I don't want to die, and yet why do I feel like I'm going to rip my eye out and then I'm going to go through all that pain and I'm still going to die anyway? And in one way, actually, it's that part that's the terrifying part in the way, because the nail thing actually probably kills you pretty fast.
I don't know, because it's implied that he stays alive for a bit.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it feels like that going into your brain on both sides would just
it probably would
shut down.
But it's fucking rough.
It's still fucking rough. It's horrible.
Yeah. Over to you for your...
Right, this is my one that I've skewed away from film and gone to TV.
Nice.
For a scene that I think for me and a lot of people left a lot of names. Now, Sorry for people who haven't watched this TV series or haven't got for it, but this is a spoiler. And this is a spoiler for The Walking Dead.
Okay.
So The Walking Dead, this is because there are many scenes in that show. And I haven't watched it since about season 9. So I kind of, it got a little bit like after a while. But this is the scene where a lot of people switched off and said it had gone too far.
Okay.
So yeah, there's Walking Dead. So if you haven't watched it and you want to switch off, Rob's stuck here, so he has to listen.
Yes, I have to. I'm just going to put my hands over my ears and not listen, and you will have a conversation with yourself.
and anyone who knows who's watched The Walking Dead, there are some fucking traumatic and horrible deaths. They were very good at like making you suddenly think, oh shit, like you've killed that person. Like really, you've killed them off. Like they're fantastic at doing those. But the problem is that sometimes when you get I think what helps it is that because it's a TV series, you get so much characterization, you get so much character building that like sometimes you can recognize the one like you're here for a couple of episodes to die.
Yeah.
But sometimes it hits a character that you don't, or it hits two characters in this case that you don't want to. This is Negan's introduction.
I thought it would be.
This is a scene that literally, like, I knew it was coming, but it was so built up. It had a whole, because it literally ended. The season before season 7 ended with his introduction.
Yeah.
And it is literally, you see him go up to them one by one. You see their hands behind their back. They're completely controllers. They're surrounded by people with guns and stuff anyway. So they know they can't do shit. The whole of the group and all of the characters, probably all of the most likable characters are lined up one by one. And you know, he says that he's going to take, well, you believe he's only going to take one.
Yeah. So
you believe one person's going to die for what you've done by taking, because they'd killed one of his group. So Negan's there, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan is just full of so much. He's like got such a charm about him. He's got that old country kind of charisma.
Yeah.
That there's something weird about the fact that he's something that you're kind of like, this guy is awesome, but at the same time, he's fucking terrible.
He's a really good villain.
And it is because they are all, and I believe now he's kind of more anti-hero in the show, and he's kind of actually more come back from this, which is hard to believe because it's such a fucking horrible scene.
Well, I've seen this, and I stopped watching The Walking Dead way before this.
Yeah, I think a lot of people looked, or some people tuned back in just to be like, there's so much hype for this episode because it was such a huge arc in the comic book.
Well, I remember memes everywhere. I remember this moment and these characters' deaths.
Yeah,
shocking.
These deaths had a backlash like crazy. There were people going, "I'm never watching this show again. What could you do?" Mainly, it was because of one character that dies because there was such a love. Yeah. So the two characters that die are Abraham, who was an awesome character, big buff guy, who like so friendly, but also he was almost like the muscle kind of thing. But he was such a lovable kind of character. And then Glenn, who obviously had always been lovable, and he'd been there since the very beginning.
He was my favorite.
You know, he was in that Stephen Young, who's gone on to many other things. You know, at the time, people were like, what are you doing? He's the one that chose to die. They weren't going to kill him. They chose they said, oh, we're giving this, and he was like, no, in the comic books that is my death. He was like, I know that normally you go against it because Abraham doesn't die in the comic books like that, but Glenn does die exactly like that in the comic books. And he was the one that went, maybe he was, after 7 seasons, he was like, it's time for me to move on anyway, but he was literally like, no, that's my death. I want to have that. I've been waiting for this storyline to come to this end. This is my conclusion, as horrible it is. But it is more the build-up. One is the fact they left you an entire season being, because you saw it from Negan's perspective. Not from his perspective. You saw it from the dead people's perspective. You saw him going down on their head from their perspective, but you didn't know who it was. So then you had a whole episode, and they built up this whole episode where you're like, shit, who's it going to be? And they did like flashbacks at the same time. So you slowly had to so you were so on fucking edge about which character's dying. And I think this was like at the very height of The Walking Dead. This is when the ratings were huge. It was so a lot of people were really like majorly like into these characters. And a lot of people knew that Glenn was the one to die. And I think that was a major part of it as well. So when Abraham dies, it's fucking horrible. It's literally like, and you see it. He bashes into his skull, and he literally goes at his head until his head is mush on the ground. And it's like, for that to be a character that you've kind of followed, and you never want someone to die in a horrible way. And in Walking Dead, they have killed some people in some horrible ways.
Yeah, they have.
But if you followed, like Abraham was in it for several seasons as well. So when you followed someone for that long, you were like, for them to have just a sudden just fucking bat to the head and just, but him to keep going and going and going, that is violent as hell. This is to me, possibly one of the most violent horror like deaths I've ever seen. Anyway, and then the difference is he's the one that died, and it kind of implied only one person died. So then when the blow comes and suddenly out of nowhere, he's just walking along and just suddenly goes whack into Glenn's head. So you see his head caved in and his eye popped out.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
Yeah, well, I made my pumpkin that year was a Glen one where I did the eye popping out of the pumpkin. And I did a mush of the head, but it was fucking like shit. Like, actually, they've actually done it. And then it's that. But it's the fact he's got a child and his wife is there watching. And
he was in it from like the second episode.
Exactly. He's the one that saves him in the first episode. He's the only reason Rick's alive in the first place to get to that point.
And Stephen Yeun he's great in every film I've seen him in, and he's such a likable guy.
He's
such a great talented actor.
He's so nice, and he'd only just had his child, and it was just there were just so many things. But the fact you see him like that, and he's like, and he's kind of like speaks to his wife, and he knows something's not right, but his brain's fucking mush at this point.
Yeah,
and then again you get the same thing. He just keeps going at him until he's mush on the ground, and it's fuck it, and then you're just left there as they leave. And surrounded by them, and then you just see there's just two giant puddles of blood around the mush of head around these two characters, and it's fucking it was traumatizing. It's probably one of the most traumatizing horror things I've ever seen, and I wasn't that, so I can't imagine what it was for someone who watched more as a general, because you got a lot of people who weren't even major horror fans but really loved Walking Dead and the characters and stuff. So I understand why there's a backlash, and as far as I'm aware, they've never gone this full on again because of the backlash they got to it. They said that was almost too violent. Yeah. Or you built it up so much that people were just like fucking brokenhearted. They were like fucking mad. So it was out of nowhere, and it just left an impact. I still remember watching, like, I have to watch this because I don't want it to be ruined for me. I remember just being in my bedroom watching it and just like watching that bit by bit and being like, my heart was like racing.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've rarely ever had that much experience of it. So for me, for going for Scariest, I was like, that's one that's got to be on there. I looked at this is my only TV one.
Yeah.
I looked at other TV ones and things like that. There are some horrible ones, but nothing even came close to how this one was. I know you watched American Horror Story Hotel.
Yeah.
And the one that Max Greenfield gets when he gets the dildo, the guy that gets and then he gets sewn into the thing. That was a really horrible one.
That was great.
Kind of thing. But that was one that popped in my head. But no, nothing kind of matches this. And there's very few in like general movies, to be honest, that have matched the intensity of this scene. This almost could have been number one. I just didn't want. I don't know why I wanted to go for a film for the first number one. This probably is the most. The scene that comes to my head that's probably matched this intensity, and it's not a horror film, but it is by a horror writer, is The Green Mile. The electrocution scene. Yeah, I remember feeling dirty after that scene.
I think we spoke about that.
Yeah, we did. But I don't. That's not really horror, is it? It's like supernatural.
But it's still fucking.
But it's fucking horrible, that scene. That's it. Just when you get certain ones, and again, and for me, those are the ones that kind of really impacts me. Like, I wasn't going to say, I've already said one of my Randy in Scream 2 left that impact because I love the character so much. So I know how people felt about that scene. So that was brutal.
It was. My number 2, moving on, is another film that I've watched for the first time this year, and the film is called Dead and Buried. It's from 1981, and I believe it is directed by Gary Sherman, who I'm not sure what else I've seen him do. He kind of comes up saying that he's best known for his work with Dead and Buried and Poltergeist 3, which is supposed to be pretty good. So it's kind of one of these other films that flies low under the radar. I went into it not really knowing what to expect, but it's set at this kind of small kind of country, town, small village near the coast, called Porter's Bluff, I think it's called. And the film opens up with this photographer, and he's taking some pictures of just like the area, and he's getting some kind of just doing his thing. And he bumps into like a local woman, and she's like, "Oh, I want to be a model." And so he's like, oh, do you want to model for me? You know, and they kind of, you know, she does some modeling shots for him, and it's all quite idyllic. And then, you know, they start flirting, and then they start talking about sex, and you're like, okay, something's going on. And then he goes around like the corner to head back to hers, and then the town just appear, and they just beat the living shit out of him. And they beat him almost to death. And then they tie him up on a post, and they burn him alive. And it's
I don't think I've seen it, but this sounds very familiar. But there are a few of those kind of ones. Apostle, that's a recent one.
Yeah,
but where it's kind of like the town is kind of like, don't break our rules, follow our
you know, kind of like we keep to ourselves, no outsiders, that kind of vibe. And it's mental because you don't see it coming. Yeah. Like if you watch the trailer for the film, it implies that something's going on, but it looks more like it's kind of like a slasher film. Yeah. And there's no like, you know, nothing to do with any of this stuff. So when you see that the whole town's in on it, you're like, what the fuck is going on here? And obviously, you know, he's screaming and he's horrid and stuff like that.
I was going to say, but being burned alive, that's like probably my worst way to die. Well, like being burned, and just in general, burning fire, like things like that sounds fucking horrible.
Well, he doesn't die. He doesn't die. What happens is, you assume that he's dead. Yeah. However, I think it's mentioned that he survives. But he's he's horribly
assuming
burned.
He's horribly fucking burned.
And he's in a full body cast in hospital. He can't move.
Yeah.
So I think, you're kind of like, what's going on here? He knows what's going on. But then a nurse then goes into the room, and she's got a needle with some kind of poison in it.
Yeah.
And he's in a full body cast. There's only one place to go with the needle, in the eyes. So you could see that he's awake and his eyes are going, and he can see what's going on, but he can't move at all.
Yeah.
And he sees this nurse approaching him, and then you see her put the injection to the eyeball, kind of like behind the eye, into the brain, and inject him. And it's just such a, it's just this horrible thing of powerlessness again,
Again, ripping out the eye is one thing, but I don't know why the idea of something directly going into the eye is even worse than just even going around the eye.
Yeah. And the whole film is kind of this, it's a very weird film. Just by telling you about this death, it's not going to spoil the film, and you're not going to know what's going on. Yeah. Because it is a very weird film. But it's just so grotesque,
Yeah, no, that sounds fucking... That guy sounds like he goes through fucking hell.
Yeah, literally. And it's just a dude who turned up to take some pictures, It's not like somebody who's been involved in, in the main story or anything. It's just literally a guy who just unfortunately happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And just the fact that can happen to somebody, they can take a sustained beating, then be burnt alive, not die, and you probably be like, oh my God, I'm in the hospital, and then to be killed in a place where you're supposed to heal and get help and stuff like that. It's just the wider implication of it as well, that the whole town's in, or there's something weird going on, and then the main character turns up and you're like, no, go. Don't be here. It's just so grim. And when I was watching it, again, the whole film is kind of has these weird, small town country feel to it. It's kind of weird. You think it's got to be, I read this term, hicksploitation, you think it's got to be like small town weird people, and it does have a little twist on it, and it's got a good twist at the end of the film as well, which is quite cool. Very weird. And it's got to be one of those twists where if you like it, you really like it because of the implication. If not, you're going to be like, oh, that's kind of shit. But I really liked it. But I would say that this is the standout kill in the film for me. And it's so brutal. It's so grotesque.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Every time you say implication, I can't not think of Dennis.
Yeah.
Every time. Implication. But the implication.
Big Dan.
Right. Okay. So, my number 2, and again, a bit of a more well-known one, but it's because this one is crossing over. So this one's actually both book, film, and, well, actually, it was a TV movie.
Okay.
So it's kind of cross because I'm reading the book right now, and it's It.
I thought it was going to be
It's Georgie's death.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's lots of ways this hit, but I liked this one because I'm reading the book, so I know that version of it, and I know the film version. And I think that this scene is terrifying. No matter it's always scary when it's a child.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I'm a dad to be, so
you are father to be.
The idea you send your kid out and they're just playing in the rain, and then this can fucking happen.
Yeah, it must be terrifying.
And if you're scared of clowns anyway, this is fucking terrifying. No matter which death it is in the film, and there's lots of scary deaths in it. It is a very well, like the film's all versions are very well made, very well written, very. But yeah, it's that whole like going down to the sewer and trusting the kind of person.
Yeah,
but I think most generally it's that bit when he goes for the arm, when he goes to bite.
Yeah.
It's that change where it's like you almost luring you into the sense that you can trust someone, and then suddenly it's like you just suddenly see the change. So in the recent film version anyway, you see that really kind of happen with the teeth, and you do see that in the TV movie too. But just that,
it's a bit more implied in the TV series, isn't it?
It's something about like hearing the screams of a child, and him like in the new, you get obviously the dragging himself.
Yeah,
there is a bit of a difference between the book and whereas in this version, Georgie gets, in the recent film version anyway, he gets dragged into the sewer. So you see this like long arm come out and pull him in, and you hear the screams of him. Whereas in the book, he's left just like with his arm ripped off, and he's left in the middle of the street bleeding in like a puddle. And the neighbors come out and hear it, and the neighbor thinks it's just a child playing around. And you kind of get the feeling of the shock of the neighbors. They run into the street and pick up this child who's missing an arm and literally basically like so pale he's dead. And there's a difference, I guess, in the disturbing feeling of the death, because in the book it's more like as if your child's got into an accident and then they die in hospital, and you've got the parents' reaction in hospital as they all arrive and they're like that he dies. And whereas in the film, which again, like until I did the book, I assumed it was the same thing, because in the film it's very much Bill is keeps searching for his brother. Yeah. Whereas that's not it in the book. Actually, that part's not part of the book, but it adds a nice layer in the recent film to have him that Bill kind of can't let go. Yeah. And it's kind of what sets up the reason they keep getting into these kind of situations. It's a nice little tweak to the original story. But it's that kind of terrifying. That one's terrifying because you never know what happened to him. You don't know. Like Bill doesn't know, his parents don't know. They've just had to live with the idea, even if the parents but in the book, obviously, you get it in the film, but in the book, it's even more implied that the parents kind of know something happens in Derry. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it just is, but it doesn't help though. Reading it or watching it, it's just horrible. Yeah. Like it's a child for one, and you get another in either part 2, chapter 2, or in the book, you obviously get the little girl at the start of the second one, which is also horrible as well, because she's weirdly like just seems so innocent and so trusting kind of thing. But no, there's just, and for me it's not necessarily even Pennywise, it is just the scene, it's the child, it's the screaming, it's that again, like that whole kind of loss of like that innocence.
I was literally going to say that, because for the most part children are innocent and they represent innocence. You're killing it, and I think the older you get, like the more you understand how your parents worry. When, for instance, this is a literal recent example of this. Me and Anna, I think we were driving. We were just driving to the shop around the corner, and we saw like a little kid on a skateboard, and he was wearing a helmet and he was just skating down his drive, and we were both like, thank God he's wearing a helmet. When you're young and somebody says, you got to wear a helmet, you're like, no, that's not cool.
As I said, the amount of time I probably rode back from like school, and like when my things like on a bike where my brakes didn't even work and shit like that, and you just think, holy shit, like the older you get, it's weird. Like obviously when you're a kid you never think, and as you get older you start to see more stories about death that happens, but you just think, holy shit, it's actually extremely easy for you to just fall over, smack your head, and that's it.
You kind of understand not just how fragile humans are and how fragile life is. And then kids don't have I mean, kids almost don't have that concept, you know. They almost have that invincibility
until you really lose someone. And even like, unless you've gone through a lot of trauma as a younger child, even as into teenagers, you're still like, I can do stupid shit.
Stupid shit
all the time. Yeah, we were train tracks, horses. Running against things for no reason, smoking stuff you shouldn't,
and
drinking at places that if you fell you'd probably die. But
and you think if you said, like, if it was like, you got to let your child do that, no, you know, it's that kind of thing. You
understand why parents are suddenly like, why are you so hard on me? It's like, because I've done it, and I know that. I don't know why I didn't die too.
Yeah,
like, that's it. Like,
you could easily, like that kid skateboarding, he could easily fall, bang his head, and have a life-changing injury. You know?
Exactly.
He could just scrape his knee, but you don't want to risk it. And it's almost and then to have, you know, the loss of a child and somebody so young and with their life ahead of them, it's traumatic.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
And as you're getting older, you get it in all kinds of areas. You get it, to be honest, it's not even just kids. It's, you start to worry about friends and family or pets. That's a very key one, because pets are so like with my dog Mia, or with you Carrie, the amount of times I'm worried that something's happened. Like, I let Mia out in the middle of the night to go to the toilet in the garden. The amount of time I think, what if it was like a fox? And just came out, kind of thing. It's like, would I be quick enough to even notice anything's happened? Or shit, did she get outside the door? Or did she get there? Or what if she's just suddenly too sick? Or you worry about all those things like you're a parent with a pet as well. So it's all these kind of terrifying things. And this scene with Georgie is kind of that. It's like it's the parent's worst nightmare. It's like a play on the abduction of a child, basically. It is, like, in the film anyway. But that's the play it kind of get. It's the loss of a child. It's all of those kind of parts, and it's one of the scariest things in life. You know what I mean? And also, this is one of the most violent scenes I've seen with a child.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we watched it in the cinema together, didn't we? It Part 1, the remake.
Yeah.
And in the Tim Curry TV miniseries, he bares his teeth, and then it kind of zooms in on it, and it's implied, you know, that Georgie's taking. But in this one, I assumed the same. I assumed it was going to be off screen, but you see him kind of rip his arm.
You see everything. You see the teeth go in, bite down, rip. You see the blood pouring out as he's crawling along the ground and screaming, and you see all of that kind of part. You know, I mean, this one, the most recent film doesn't hold back on any of these scenes with kids, or, you know, there's one scene when a kid just literally gets basically pulverized against a glass door when he goes to eat him. There's one when they get in the face, and you see it chewing on her face with a child. These are all child scenes. You know, Stephen King's not scared to go against those things.
No, and I'm even, you know, I'm going to say it. I even like it Part 2.
Oh, I like it. I didn't see what was wrong with it. Most of it's very good. It's very true to the story and stuff like that. Most of the actors are very good. In the majority of them actually are very good. And it's only the fact that the ending doesn't fully translate onto screen. Yeah, the way it dies at the end, I don't know why, it just feels a bit suddenly anticlimactic.
Yeah, it's a bit.
That's the only bit that I think leaves it, is because he looks like that weird egg, which is like, I feel like they've done so many other things to change away, because obviously in the original story, that's why it's a fucking 1,000-odd and it takes me forever to even get anywhere near it. I've had to start listening on audio book, because I was like, I never have time to actually read a book, so I listened to it on the way back. Yeah. But in the original book, there's all that intergalactic, like, different dimensions, turtle stuff, and it's just like, I know some people are like, oh, and the second one, it should have done. It's like, no, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's hard.
The same reason we're not going to have a child orgy. You know what I mean? You just can't put that on screen. It's just no. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, because that was more of a metaphorical kind of thing in the book. Yeah. It's not even meant to necessarily be like a physical thing, but it's metaphorical for age in the book. Yeah. It's not something that should be on screen. No, that's and it. And I think the terrors of Pennywise ages them enough. Yeah. But yeah, that's right. I think for most part, I didn't really see what was so wrong. I don't know why people are so against. I didn't think it was hugely different. I feel like the first part was more people were loving the nostalgia of things like Stranger Things, and they liked the fact that it was the younger kids against it. Maybe when it was the adults against it, suddenly it felt a bit less special. And I think also I think it was a sleeper hit. I think, you know, a lot of I think people were like, it's going to be good,
but it's not going to be.
I'm not denying that. I think the first one is the better film.
Oh yeah, I think it's the better film, but I don't think because it sets some records, and I think it still has. But
for like an R rating, especially for a horror, I'm pretty sure it's the highest horror of all time.
But I think it's kind of like, a lot of people had seen the series and they were kind of like, it'll be cool, it'll be a good film. But I don't think people expected it to be as good as it was. Yeah. So the kind of anticipation of the second was, this is going to be amazing.
I was going to say, and I also think, like I said, with the kids and stuff, I almost think some people thought they were going to get more of the same.
Yeah, maybe.
It's like, that's not how the story goes.
Maybe.
You know what I mean?
Well,
so there you go.
It's a beautiful one, man. Before we go to our, number ones, we will take a little trip over to the social media lounge. I don't know why I messed that up then. And so obviously what we do is we put what episode we're discussing, and we read a couple out. So come and find us on Twitter and Instagram is what we do it at CMTH Podcast.
You got the Twitter, I got the Insta.
Yeah. So we only had one on the Twitter this week, and that was Flicks and Friends Podcast, at F_F Podcast, which, go check them out. They're a new podcast, and we're in the process of arranging a little episode on theirs. So go check it out. And they said that one of the favorite is in Hatchet, when Victor Crowley rips that lady's mouth open by pulling her jaws apart. Yeah, it is terrifying, and it does show just the brutality of the film.
I'd something like that. I'd probably honor like on most violent kind of things like that. Over on Insta we had Discount Josh for the Discount Podcast, and he said the one that sticks with him is the brain eating in Hannibal. Ray Liotta eating the, which, to be fair, I totally get that. That is scary. Then J.M. Kilbourne, he said Philip's death in Dream Warriors.
Yeah.
It's something so cruel about it that scares me, is what he said. And it is. It's complete loss of control in that.
Complete loss of control is that he's been, Freddy is literally he's a nice pun. He's toying with him. I love that. But it's a terrifying death. We did cover that in, I believe, episode 45. So if you haven't checked it out, check out our Dream Warriors episode.
And then Jeffrey Grenell also said about the just saw deaths. He just couldn't choose. He just said saw deaths in general were just fucking terrifying.
A lot of them
we talked about in this episode. And there are lots of them that could play with you in all kinds of different ways.
So my number one, this gets me every time. There was an ice cream man here.
If you're hearing a jingle outside, an ice cream man has arrived.
Yeah, that's
on a not so sunny day.
Not so sunny day.
It's still quite humid.
Bank holiday.
We sweat.
Yeah. So my number one is. I keep thinking that's just going to be in the background like a jingle whilst I talk.
The ice cream man's coming to kill you.
So it is Zombie Flesh Eaters, as it was kind of released in Italy, Zombie 2. By Lucio Fulci. I believe that is the pronunciation.
Yes.
Now Epo knows I love my...
I feel like I know which one this is. I feel like the death I would choose out of that film.
Yes, it probably is.
I feel like you have got a theme running here.
I have got a theme running here. It is the one, I believe.
I mean, your first ones didn't match this, but your last was definitely your theme.
Man. So it's Italian horror, which I love. I always had that bit about it not being synced up and dubbed properly, but then once I understood it, I grew to love it. And I just think it's such it's a fucking mine of amazing horror films. And in terms of gore, these guys, Italian horror films push the envelope, definitely.
We talked about this a little bit in our Dawn of the Dead episode.
Yeah, we did a little.
Our original Dawn, we've done the remake as well, but we talked about this in the original because obviously Zombie was a playoff of Dawn of the Dead, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Zombie 2 was
So
many different titles.
Well, how that spawned, because Dawn of the Dead was Zombie in Italy. How that started was George A. Romero. I watched a video about it, so that's how I know. George A. Romero basically wanted to put together Dawn of the Dead, and he wrote it, and Dario Argento, who I love, said, you know, he was a big fan. So he said, okay, come to Italy and write the film here. Be away from everything, be peaceful, write the film here. So George A. Romero went to Italy and he wrote the first draft of Dawn of the Dead. And Lucio Fulci, Dario Argento loved it. He said, I'm not going to, you know, touch your, I'm not going to influence you at all. What I'll do, though, is I'll introduce you to some Italian backers to get it made and to finance the film.
Yeah.
But part of that was, when you do that, can I basically have it and release my own cut of it, which is how we got Zombie.
Yeah.
And apparently, I haven't seen the Argento cut yet, but he got Goblin to do the music, and he got rid of a lot of the comedy, apparently. So it's a lot darker and it's a lot more of a serious film. So I think it's like 10, 18 minutes shorter. It's on Amazon Prime, or Shudder, so I need to watch it. But
yeah, I was going to say, I haven't seen Zombie, that version of it.
Yeah.
I do remember when we looked at Dawn of the Dead, though, we did talk about like the differences of the scene. So go check that episode out. And I have seen Zombie Flesh or Zombie 2.
Yes. And that is, I actually called this one, I won't be watching that again. Because, you know, Lucio Fulci just has something about the eyes. You know, there's a great quote by Dwight Schrute, which is the groin is the eye, is the eyes are the groin of the face. And that's because it's so vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it's so gross. But in all of his films, there is a shot where something happens to the eyes.
Yeah.
And in Zombie Flesh Eaters, we get Paula, who is in, you know, she's in this kind of house alone, or she's in this shack.
Yeah, it's kind of like a cabin kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And the zombie is trying to get through and get to her. The zombies themselves are kind of voodoo inspired zombies.
Yeah,
it's kind of it doesn't really relate very well to Dawn of the Dead.
No, because they've actually got a lot more, because of the like how this scene goes and stuff like that. They do actions that are not similar to the way that they do in Dawn of the Dead. They're much more almost closer to like thinking more day of it, like not in that way, but you know, they seem to make choices of more violent things to do instead of just eating.
They seem to be, I think that's
a bit more conscious.
Voodoo zombies. And it's, you know, Paula is in this kind of house alone and a zombie tries to break in, and we have this, it's a terrifying scene because, you know, it's being attacked by an unknown assailant. Also something that can't be stopped. You know, you think the zombies don't get tired. They, you know, it's like the Terminator. You know, they don't get tired. They don't eat. They don't sleep. They can't be they can't be bargained with. All they want to do is kill you, and it's horrid. You know, the zombie kind of manages to break through this door that she's kind of hiding behind, and then it grabs her head, and we get this horrid shot as it's pulling her towards this splintered kind of piece of wood, and then it slowly plunges into her eye, and she slowly kind of gets pulled down, and it's so fucking gross, man. You know, and it's just this. Fulci has something about the eyes. All of his films will have gouging or ripping or something, or fingers into the eyes, you know, and it just gets me squeamish every time. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. I think it's maybe because if you survived, you know, and you just be blind forever. Yeah. And it's like when we recently watched the Wrong Turn remake.
Yeah.
Now I think people were hit and miss on it, but one of the things that terrified me in that was when they burnt the eyes with the hot poker and sentenced people to darkness. And it's that whole idea. Imagine
it's horrible. The idea of going through it. I was going to say I watched Halloween Kills again the other day, and Big John.
Yeah, Big John. Thumbs
to the eyes until literally his eyes just pop out around. Yeah, it's just, anything with the eye. It just is such a vulnerable place that anytime it hits it, you're just like, fuck. It's like I guess it's almost in one way you're like, even if I survived it, I don't like, that's such a horrible thing to have to overcome. You know?
Yeah.
You know,
permanent darkness.
Permanent darkness. You know what I mean? Like the strength and bravery of people who are blind. Because I literally don't even know how I would exist without those kind of quality in that way. So what you'd have to overcome, and that's just if you survive it. And obviously they don't survive it. Yeah, but it's still fucking like, oh my god, like the pressure you're pushing, or something being pushed through your eye or pulled out or burnt. It's
so grotesque, man. It's such a beautifully terrifying scene that every time I just can't. I just can't.
Yeah, no, it's mad.
I can't not, you know.
Yeah. Fucking horrible.
But yeah, that is my number one. Short and sweet.
Number one.
I fear the darkness. Yeah, I fear the eye. You know.
I think my one's so my number one. It is not a choice I necessarily expected to, and it's from Sinister.
Okay.
Which, as we know, on recent certain studies and stuff, people have found that Sinister was found to be one of the scariest films that people have ever seen.
Yeah.
Because there's just something so unsettling about it. And I actually hadn't seen this for a long time. This is one of the weird ones where Charlotte had actually seen this film before me.
Oh, wow.
At uni, they all went on the trip to go to see it. So I think I was too sick and I didn't go to see it. And again, because Sinister fell into that kind of era of Insidious and Paranormal Activity,
yeah,
and I just kind of crossed it off in my head as, I don't know, it's just another supernatural kind of one anyway, and I'm not that keen on them, so I kind of pushed it off in my head thinking, I'm not that bothered. So it took a long time for me to actually finally see it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't what I expected at all when I thought it was going to be some kind of spooky, ghosty kind of thing, when it actually is much more unsettling in the imagery.
It really is.
And the main part of this, the deaths part of this, it's the found footage scenes that get moved in throughout it, which are just horribly unsettling because it gives this juxtaposition of the happy family and then their death. You have a happy family doing something like sitting around a table or laughing and things like that, and then suddenly they're dangling from a tree.
Yeah.
And the creature that just the figure that appears, that kind of whitish kind of face in the dark hair, you can't quite make out.
I can't remember his name.
No, I can't remember off the top of my head. But it's the fact that when you see him appear, or if you're looking really carefully in the footage, you do actually spot him in the background. But it's more because I think the figure gives the idea, very much like, say, Michael Myers with the shape. Yeah. It's a well thought out one because it kind of looks like that thing, like I mentioned before, like when I used to live at my old house in the back corner of the garden. It was such a dark space that sometimes you'd walk past and go, I swear I just saw someone stood at the back of that corner of that garden. And it's that unsettlingness, the idea that you're just there, like, because he's kind of secluded, he's put himself in the room, he's writing his books and stuff like, Ethan Hawke's character in the film. And because he's kind of alert, and then after that, you kind of get the same feeling that you kind of feel while you're watching it. He gets this kind of afterwards, like, is there something knocking in the room? Is there someone out? You can see he's unsettled, and he's in his house suddenly, and he's properly unsettled. And that's the same reason I used to remember feeling when it's like when I'd been done something stupid, like I'd probably been like looking at online, and I'd been looking at, I don't know, someone like the Ramsey's death case or things like that, or like ways people have died, and I'd read through them and go, these are they're interesting, but like it's creepy that things like this really happen. And then suddenly the second you stop reading, you're like, and now I'm alone. Yeah. So then you realize, don't you? And then you're like, holy shit. And suddenly everything outside. So when you've got like a proper dark spot in the garden, but that part is also, I thought, made it extra unsettling. But it's just the way, it's just happy families. And I think the scariest one, and I think the one that leaves the most terrifying is when you've got the whole family like playing around the pool and things like that. And then it cuts to them all being tied on the grass. Yeah. And the lawnmower as it goes, and again, it's not like you don't necessarily see it like what you're expecting to see, because it's such like classic, the footage is obviously old, like 70s style kind of flipping, like film based, that kind of thing. But it's just so terrifying about the idea that you're watching these things and you think they're happy home movies, and as I said, there's just a creepy thing about that main figure being there, popping there. You notice him popping around, and the fact that the family can go from such size, and not only that, it's the fact that I'm not a huge, as I said, not a huge supernatural, but this plays very much on like murder cases in real life as well. Yeah, it does. Like the idea of what can happen to your family. You think you're safe, and it plays against the idea, like I'm saying, about being alone, and yet all these families are all together, and yet they've all managed to be attacked. And in that kind of odd like Amityville horror, the idea that was based on like true story, about one person who went mad. You've got that creepiness in there that it could happen, and it's not just necessarily just to you, it's your whole family. Someone can come into your house, take you like when you don't expect it and manage to overpower you and kill all of you together.
The Super 8 videos themselves are incredibly creepy.
All of those scenes are just like, oh shit. Okay.
And
they're the best part of the film for me.
And while Sinister 2 is, I think I enjoy it. It's not as strong, but it does have some other super creepy ones. You know, one of the worst ones for me is these people being buried alive in the snow.
Oh, I haven't seen the second one.
It's worth checking out. But obviously the twist of these is that it's the kid who's doing it. It's your own kid doing this to you. You know?
Yeah, exactly. It's so that's where the kind of more the possession kind of part comes in,
and how terrifying that would be.
Yeah, you know? The ending of this film, that powerless part as well. That's also absolutely terrifying. Like what happens to them at the end, the fact that they then become that.
Yeah.
But I think the first part that kind of piques your kind of scariest, the fact that the people are dying like that, and you kind of get that scene.
Yeah.
And you get several of these in the film. And yes, the ending of this film is also absolutely that it's right under your nose, what's going to happen to you kind of thing. And that kind of idea of someone's changing and the fact that it could be your children. And you know what I mean? And again, playing into all these things like the idea that something horrible could happen to your children, or the fact that happened to you when you're alone, or just the fact that what could happen to you in your own house, and, you know, that loss of control. And, you know, I think that's kind of played almost throughout all of mine, that loss of control getting you inside quite a lot of like your house or your friends or your family, in your groups, the things that you could lose kind of thing. And that's that's why I think I was surprised at how effective it was. And I now understand why a bunch of people coming back from uni were fucking terrified that night.
It is, man. It's a terrifying film. And again, some of those deaths and the implication of it, you know, your own child killing you. It's it's mortifying.
All these, your child killing you, losing of your family, the fact that you could be in such a big number and yet you're still could be murdered and killed, and the fact that you know that stuff like this has really happened,
and similar,
like not like they're not the child possessed by the
by the demon,
but the original Amityville is like the stories around it are that they said that he was possessed and he killed his family. So that was the original real story of the Amityville horror. So it's interesting.
Well, I mean, it follows on. It follows on from your Georgie death, because Georgie's death is about the death of innocence, and this is the corruption of innocence.
Exactly.
Which is even more terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in certain places, you know, and you've seen the way that corruption can come, and it might not be in this way, but, you know, in real life, even things like shootings, which normally end up being kids that have kind of somehow been corrupted by the idea, you know, or the power of guns and like what they've been sold and the ideas and idealism. All that stuff is terrifying, and that can really happen in your life. Yeah. And it does happen regularly.
It's fucking creepy, man.
It's fucking crazy. Yeah. So did you have any that you were toying with, or
I had
fiddling with?
Well, there was a few outside of films. I was thinking, I don't want to say who dies. I know it's a massive spoiler and everybody will know, but Anna hasn't watched it yet, so I'm gonna watch it with her. And it was the Red Wedding.
Oh,
not just because of what happens, but it's, for me, it's the mutilation of somebody's body after, which has haunted me since. And
there were many that weren't horror. That I was like, because it would said horror, I was like, I can't do that. But there were many that were like, oh, fucking hell, yeah.
That was terrifying. I'm
going to say there was one that actually scared the shit out of me in the again, I'm not saying anything, it's brand new. House of Dragon has a very traumatizing scene. Have you seen
I've seen that.
That's it, especially for me in my situation. And I was like, Charlotte loves I was about to say Grey's Anatomy. I was like, that's a really different thing. I mean, Game of Thrones. But that scene, I was almost like, I don't know whether she should watch this right now.
Well, last night we're working our way through American Horror Story 1984, and you know, there was one of the main characters is a flashback scene, and his brother is swimming, and somebody gets in a boat and doesn't see him, and the propeller smashes his head open. And it was terrifying, but the mother is distraught and is crying, screaming and blaming everyone. And Anna looked away and literally said to me, Rob, I can't watch this scene. Yeah. And I was a bit of a dick, and I was like, well, I have to watch it because it is integral to the story. And I was like, should I, when you just look away, cover your ears? She was like, I can't hear it, because the mum's screaming and it's terrifying and it's horrid.
I think there is on the TV side of it, because we've done horror scenes not in a horror film, but that was all films. I think there's a lot in TV that I could jump on. There's one that I remember seeing even if it's non-horror, way back to say when I was younger on a British soap that I felt scarred me. It was Coronation Street, and it was Richard Hillman. He was murdered. He was one of the first signs of a serial killer, on a British soap.
Okay.
Kind of thing. And he a mum comes home early from the pub one night, and he beats her to death with a crowbar.
Fucking hell.
And it was literally when you're 6 years old and you're just watching that, and you knew that was going to be some big happening kind of thing about a killer. You knew that he was had that past.
Yeah.
But you don't see it, but you see him go at her, and then you hear him go thud, 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 and he's basically cracked her head in.
Yeah.
And it was just and then you see the husband come home and the child screaming upstairs, and it was a fucking traumatizing for a soap.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Rip Heather Trott, I remember you being brutally killed by Ben Mitchell, huh?
Oh yeah, they forget about that.
Yeah, Strange Love Triangle. Right?
In terms of film, we've got ones we've already mentioned, so go and check out our recent rec episode, because the ending of that is a terrifying.
That's terrifying,
ending, and that is a terrifying. I say death, I believe, as I said, she comes back in a sequel, apparently. I don't quite know how. I did have, so this is one I said about Psycho, the opening scene of Jaws made people terrified of going to. So that's scarring for people. Blair Witch Project, the ending, Heather's death.
Yeah.
That hole in the corner kind of, you don't see the death, but it is a terrifying scene.
It's been played up quite a lot.
Yeah, it has. So it was, again, these are more the ones that I think are iconic. And I think lastly for me was Jeepers Creepers, because that one definitely left an impact. Justin Long's death at the end of that, where he's left at the end again. You don't see the death, but the fact he's dead, and he gets taken away, and you're not quite expecting the twist the first time you saw it. But there's just so chilling about the end of that.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's enjoyable. Hopefully, we can now spend the rest of the day cleansing ourselves of this walk down traumatic memory.
We apologize if you listen to this list at night and it has brought back some traumatic memories. We apologize, because you're probably now not going to sleep for tonight if you listen to this at night time, which is probably a terrible time to listen, but a good time because you're listening to us.
And it's a horror podcast, so we got
what you're in for.
I was going to say we've got to give you the willies sometimes.
If you do it at certain times when if you get terrified by these things and you're doing it at the middle of the night, I must feel like you're giving yourself some kind of abuse in your own way. If you're doing it to yourself,
you know what you're doing. But we hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you for listening and sticking with us. Come and let us know some of your terrifying deaths and what you thought on our ones at Instagram and Twitter at CMTH Podcast, also on TikTok. Hit the subscribe button so you get the episodes as soon as they're released, and if you leave us a lovely review, it will help us to grow. Stay safe, avoid any clowns in the sewer, avoid moving house, watching any 8 reels, and make sure that you stay safe, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.